It's playoff time, and the Bills open up on the road against one of the hottest teams in the NFL. I'll tell you how the Bills can beat the Jaguars today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Locked On Bills is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, folks, welcome in. It's time to get ready for the Bills' wild card opponent, the challenges they present, and what the Bills need to do to deal with them. So let's dive in. The Bills, of course, on the road in the wild card round to face the Jacksonville Jaguars. The game will be played on Sunday, January 11th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time at Everbank Stadium in Jacksonville, Florida. You can watch the game on CBS. Jim Nantz is on the play-by-play. Tony Romo is your game analyst, and Tracy Wolfson is the sideline reporter. This will be the 21st all-time meeting between the Bills and Jaguars, and the two teams have split the first 20 matchups. The Bills have won 10. The Jaguars have won 10. The Bills under Sean McDermott are 2-3 against the Jaguars, and all-time the Bills in the playoffs against the Jaguars are 0-2. Of course, the Bills' playoff game in Jacksonville back in 2017 when they broke the drought, the 10-7 loss, and then in 1995, the Bills lost to Jacksonville 30-27 in Buffalo. And so the Bills will be looking for their first win in 3 tries against Jacksonville in the playoffs. The Bills enter this game 12-5. They finished second in the AFC East and were the number 6 seed in the AFC playoffs. The Jaguars are 13-4. They won the AFC South and are the number 3 seed in the AFC. And they started the year 5-4. And they finished the year 13-4, an 8-game winning streak to end the season. And, of course, it was year 1 of Liam Cohen and, of course, a new defensive coordinator in Anthony Campanelli. And you watched this team early on, and it looked like a team that was very talented. But, of course, new scheme, right, trying to figure out what they are as a team. And you feel like they kind of figure that out in the middle of the season and have won their last 8 games and are playing really good ball. So let's dive in a little bit more. The head coach, of course, Liam Cohen, 40 years old. It's his first season with the Jaguars and as an NFL head coach. And he's kind of had a quick glow up. And the last few years he's bounced around, but it's all been kind of posturing to be the head coach right now for the Jaguars. He was an assistant with the Rams, an offensive assistant with the Rams 2018 through 2020. Then he went to Kentucky to be their offensive coordinator in 2021. Then back to the Rams to be their offensive coordinator in 2022. Then back to Kentucky to be their offensive coordinator in 2023. Then he goes to Tampa Bay in 2024 and has that great season with Baker Mayfield, over 4,000 yards, all the passing touchdowns that he had. And then he got the opportunity to be the head coach in Jacksonville. And he's certainly a coach of the year candidate for the turnaround that they've had. You think about it, there's not that much different with this football team compared to the one last year under Doug Peterson that obviously was pretty lifeless. And we saw that team in Buffalo early in the season. They didn't have a great year. Their defense was a mess. And, they've pretty much changed their coaching staff, a few players here and there, of course, but pretty much the same football team with new coaching. And you can see that they've really gotten a lot out of this team. The quarterback is Trevor Lawrence, 26 years old. 6'6", 220 pounds, was a number 1 pick by Jacksonville out of Clemson in 2021. He started 77 games for his career. Jacksonville was 35-42 in those 77 starts. He had a great season, completed 61% of his passes, 236 passing yards per game, 29 passing touchdowns. I believe that's a Jacksonville Jaguars record that he set this year. 12 interceptions and a passer rating of 91. He's also a guy that can run it. 359 rushing yards, 9 rushing touchdowns this season. This year he had a good season, a guy that threw the ball down the field quite a bit. 16% of his throws were down the field, which is 20 yards or more, the second highest rate in the NFL. And when you go over just the last 8 games, because I think that's the important data point to examine this Jaguars team. 9 weeks of kind of settling in, figuring out the scheme. They had some changes with their pass catchers, and they found their groove. And so when I give you these metrics, they're going to be the last 8 games because I think that's more representative of who this team is. So over the last 8 games, Trevor Lawrence is 19 of 40 for 553 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception on throws 20 yards or more down the field. That's the most passing yards in the NFL on deep throws since week 11. So the Bills are going to be challenged with some vertical throws in this game. Yards after catch is not a big part of the formula here. Only 38% of the passing yards for Trevor Lawrence come after the catch. That's 30th in the NFL. Goes to his first read 68% of the time. That's 9th highest in the league. Not a very quick triggered quarterback. 2.75 seconds is his average time to throw. That's 21st. Throws a catchable ball, 76% of his attempts. That's 11th highest. Has a 2.5% turnover-worthy throw rate, which is 12th best in the NFL. He's pressured 40% of his dropbacks, which is 12th highest. Play action happens 25% of their passing attempts, which is 21st. And they run screens 11% of the time, which is 11th. And so, look, he had a great season, finished really, really strong. Like I mentioned, the settling in of the system, and then we'll talk about it here in the next segment, but stabilizing the weapons in some ways, a big trade for Jakobi Meyers, Parker Washington being more featured, Brenton Strange getting healthy, really kind of changed things around. And he's executing at a high level. He's confident. This is not a player that isn't skilled, right? This is a number 1 overall pick and one of the most, celebrated prospects coming into the league. He's supremely talented. And it feels like they've finally got the right stuff around him and the right coaching to get him to play his best ball. He's had good seasons in the past, right? He's passed for over 4,000 yards. He's been productive. But he's kind of eliminated a lot of the mistakes that have been costly for him. Situational issues, missing some big throws and big moments, fumbles. That's really kind of gone away down the stretch here. And I think you give a big hat tip to Liam Cohen. Think about the last 3 years for Liam Cohen. You go back to that last season in Kentucky. Got the best out of Will Levis we've ever seen at Kentucky. Got the best out of Baker Mayfield we've ever seen last year with Tampa. And now certainly the best we've seen out of Trevor Lawrence this year in Jacksonville. So Liam Cohen, his fingerprints are all over this thing. They got Trevor Lawrence playing at a high level, and he's got a good supporting cast, which we'll talk about here on the other side of it. So, folks, be sure to stick with me. Hey, guys, the draft pick positions are set, so many teams are looking for their franchise quarterback. Have you ever wished to become a pro quarterback getting drafted first overall by your favorite team? Well, now you can. There's a mobile game just for you called Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a number 1 draft pick quarterback, and it's your job to lead your team to greatness to help turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. This is the number 1 quarterback career mode game on the mobile app stores, and it introduces the most realistic environment with full career control. You're going to sign contracts, train, and upgrade yourself, build chemistry, and evolve your teammates, give input to your GM on roster moves, play the actual games in 2D, and rise through the ranks to become a pro football legend. You'll deal with the ups and downs of a quarterback career, from rookie nerves to playoff drama, and every choice shapes your journey. Ultimate QB is totally free to play, has no ads, and works 100% offline. Perfect for when you want to sneak in a quick game or two on the go. Just head on over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com, or search for Ultimate QB in your app store. And we got something special just for you. Use the promo code LOCKEDON, all caps, in the game store to get a free boost and start your career. Ultimate QB Football Legend QB1. It's your legacy. Finding a doctor you actually like can feel like discovering a diamond in the rough. You want someone in network, nearby, with availability, but you also want a doctor who really listens and makes you feel comfortable, explains things clearly, and helps you walk out feeling confident about your next step. Your diamond in the rough doctor exists, and finding them is easy with ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can choose someone you truly connect with. I love that you can search for specialty or symptoms and quickly find the right fit. Being able to choose in-person or video visits makes scheduling way easier, and you can check the verified patient reviews to get a real sense of the doctor's vibe and communication style. And if you need to, book care fast, this is the place you got to go. It makes the entire process very simple. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a doctor you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. And thank you to ZocDoc for sponsoring this message. All right, welcome back, folks. If you want to get one of these Let James Cook shirts, of course, the 2025 rushing champion, I've got them for you. Go to thejoemarino.com. There's a shop. We got some merch on there. Some other things you can check out, but get you one of these Let James Cook shirts. You can get them in a lot of different colors. I have the white one on, but tons of different color options for you. And go grab one over at thejoemarino.com and find the shop. All right, let's talk about this Jaguars offense that is coordinated by Grant Udinski. But, Liam Cohen is the play caller. He's the guy here when it comes to this offense. Metrically, they're scoring 28 points per game this year. That's sixth highest in the league. They pass it 55% of the time. That's 19th. They run it 45% of the time. That's 14th. In terms of frequency, they're 12th in EPA per play on offense. They're 10th in EPA per pass, 19th in EPA per rush. They convert 39% of their third downs. That's 19th. They're 62% scoring touchdowns in the red zone. That is 10th. Let's talk about this personnel because it has really evolved, especially at the wide receiver position, where you thought about the Jaguars coming into this year and you thought Brian Thomas Jr. in year 2, Travis Hunter, who they picked high in the first round, traded up, gave away their first-round pick next year to get Travis Hunter. And you thought about De'Ami Brown, who they gave a pretty big contract extension to. Well, it's not really that at all. Unfortunately, Travis Hunter's injured. And De'Ami Brown is really more of a depth player, doesn't have much of a role here. And Brian Thomas is still part of the mix, but he's not really the number one guy here. So what happened is they traded for Jakobi Meyers from the Raiders, a great trade, who is really, you think about the glow up of this offense, it really coincided with going out and getting Jakobi Meyers, who's a good football player. Of course, we saw him for a number of years with the Patriots. He goes to the Raiders. Nobody can be productive with the Raiders. They got nothing good going on in that offense. And he comes here and he's just a really good fit. And it's unlocked a lot for their offense. You've heard Liam Cohen talk about just how critical he's been to how this team has changed. And I remember I wanted the Bills to trade for Jakobi Meyers, and they didn't trade for anybody. So he's been a big part of this mix, just a pro, right? Good route runner, can win in the intermediate areas of the field. He's a ball winner. He's got that dog in him. He's a good football player. And they have Parker Washington, who is a slot receiver with a lot of verticality to his game. Really competitive, a guy that can win with the ball in his hands, but, that verticality that he offers in the slot is really good. And then they do have Brian Thomas Jr., their first-round pick from 2 years ago, who obviously has a speed threat to him. It was really productive last year, and he's still in this mix. And then in terms of a depth option, they have Tim Patrick and De'Ami Brown. At tight end, Brenton Strange has become the guy here. A really dynamic athlete that, I think about his first few years in Jacksonville. There was a lot of mistakes, but he has settled in, and those physical traits that he's always had have started to really show up in the passing game for them. And then in terms of their depth at tight end, Quentin Morris, we know that guy, right? And then Johnny Munt, who's that traditional third tight end that a lot of teams have. And then at running back, it's about Travis Etienne, first-round pick several years ago. And multifaceted player. He can catch it. He can run it. He has some speed. Their running offense hasn't been they're something they can lean on this year. In fact, it's probably average to slightly below average. But Travis Etienne, multifaceted playmaker at running back that has that home run ability. And then after him, it's rookie Bashal Tutin, who's really explosive, but hasn't really claimed much of a role here for this offense. So let's talk about their carry distribution. Again, the last 8 games, that's the sample size that I think is most important. Travis Etienne has 125 carries for 451 yards. Then it's Trevor Lawrence with 38 carries for 187 yards. And then Bashal Tutin also 38 carries for 143 yards. So it's it's ETN. You got to be mindful of Lawrence and his ability to run, and then we'll see what type of role Tootin has, but he hasn't had a huge chunk of this pie here when it comes to running the football. Their target distribution, Jakobi Meyers, the last 8 games, leading target getter with 55. Then it's Parker Washington with 43, Brenton Strange with 35, Brian Thomas Jr. 29, Travis Etienne 19, Tim Patrick 18, and then Q Morris at 7. So they'll spread it around a little bit, but it's mostly Meyers, Washington, Strange, Thomas as their go-to guys in this passing game. Let's talk about this offensive line. Kind of interesting how this has come together. At left tackle, it's Cole Van Lanen, and it's been quite the journey for Cole Van Lanen, a fourth-year player out of Wisconsin. Going into this year, he only played about 300 snaps for his career in 4 seasons. And he had some time earlier this year at right guard, some time earlier this year at right tackle, and then since week 13, he's been their starting left tackle. And they like what they've seen so much that they've already signed him to a 3-year, $51 million deal. And which is interesting because they had a paid left tackle in Walker Little, who is now their super sub that has actually played the last couple games at right guard. So they love this left tackle that has recently stepped into the role, and it's Cole Van Lanen out of Wisconsin. Their left guard is Ezra Cleveland, good starting NFL guard. Athleticism, that's what I think about with Ezra Cleveland, his range, his ability in pass pro. Their center is Robert Hainsey, came over from Tampa Bay, obviously some familiarity with Liam Cohen. Good, solid starting center. The right guard is preferably Patrick McCarry, who you probably remember from a long run in Baltimore. He's missed the last couple games with a back injury. Not sure if he's going to be able to go this week. If not, it'll be Walker Little, who is their former left tackle, who's now like their 6th offensive lineman. Then at right tackle, it's Anton Harrison, their first-round pick a few years ago. He has really settled in. I think he's become a quality starter for them. And, the pass pro, the foot speed, it's all very strong. And he settled into becoming a really good right tackle. So solid offensive line. I think they've got 4 sufficient level starters at their left tackle, left guard, center, and right guard. And I think they got a quality starter in their right tackle, Anton Harrison. So what are my keys for this Bills defense against this Jaguars offense? Number one is you got to defend the deep ball. And, the Bills don't get tested a lot with deep throws. I think that's not going to be the case here against Jacksonville. This is a team that likes to push the ball down the field. And, it's not just the 20-plus. If you go to 15 yards average depth of target or longer, Trevor Lawrence has the 2nd most passing yards over the last 8 games in the NFL, only behind Matthew Stafford. So the Bills are not going to just face dink and dunk this week against this passing offense. They're going to push it. Intermediate throws, deep throws. And you got to compete for the ball. And the Bills will probably mix and match their coverages and all that. But this is the type of game where they got some dudes at the catch point, really good athletes, really good ball winners. And the Bills DBs are going to have to compete and drive on the ball and contest these throws that are coming in that intermediate and deep area of the field. So, number one, defend the deep ball, and you got to be really competitive at the catch point in this game. Number 2 is you got to diversify your looks. Trevor Lawrence is playing at a high level right now, very confident football. So how do you disrupt that? How do you get him out of that? I think about what the Bills did to Drake May in the second half of that game that the Bills wind up, coming back from 21 down. I think they outscored New England like 35-10 over like the last 3 quarters or whatever it was. And they really limited Drake May. I mean, the guy didn't do a thing in the second half of that game. What worked, right? Drake May's having a great year, confident. He was on a heater, and the Bills were able to really stymie that. And I think about just how diverse the Bills were with their looks. They didn't show him a lot of things twice. They ran that spy mirror concept, which will, something you want to use against, Trevor Lawrence. You want to disguise things, do your simulated pressures. And I think the diversity of the Bills back 7 can really lean into this, using Dorian Williams as kind of a rush player at times and blitzing him and allow him to set some picks and clear some runways. You probably want to think about your defensive backfield. I wish the Bills had Max Harrison this week. I really do. I think he'd be the perfect kind of guy to allow play against Brian Thomas Jr. And then you kind of have Christian Benford on Meyers. And then, of course, you'll rely on Taron Johnson for the slot player, Parker Washington. But the Bills won't have him. So how can you utilize some of your versatility with your back 7 players to match up here? But ultimately, it's about diversifying looks and keeping Trevor Lawrence guessing because he's playing confident right now. You got to get him out of that some way. And then number 3, the defensive ends have to show up. This is a Greg Rousseau, Joey Bosa game. This is a big game for them because I don't really love the possibilities that the Bills have with their interior pass rush. When I think about the best chances to win, it's Cole Van Lanen, who, look, congratulations on the contract, still a very inexperienced player at left tackle. At right tackle, Anton Harrison, this is playoff football. This is Joey Bosa. Bosa and Rousseau have got to make an impact in this game and get some heat on Trevor Lawrence, who will hold on to the ball a little bit. He'll fumble it, and it's going to be on those defensive ends to show up in a big way against Jacksonville. All right, we got more to do. Let's talk about this defense that, for all the discussion about the offense and what it's done over the last 8 games, this defense has really, really turned things around. We'll talk about it here next, folks. Be sure to stick with me. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the game tips off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during the happy hour always brings something new, boosts, bonuses, and surprises, and it's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. It's going to add that extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, let's talk about this Jaguars defense that is coordinated by Anthony Campanelli. 43 years old. It's his first season with the Jaguars, first season as an NFL defensive coordinator. And he spent last year with the Packers as their linebackers coach and defensive run game coordinator under Jeff Hafley, who they spent some time together in college at Boston College. And then prior to that, 4 years as the Miami Dolphins linebackers coach. And, he was a candidate for that job in Miami. They went with Anthony Weaver. But Campanelli, goes to Green Bay. That was a great defense in 2024. And now he's the coordinator for the Jaguars. And he feels like a guy that's on a very fast track to maybe having his own chance to be a head coach. They don't blitz that often, 27% blitz rate, 20th in the NFL. So that's something to be mindful of. They're going to play a ton of zone coverage. But so far this year, they're 8th in scoring defense. They allow 20 points per game, 3rd in EPA per play, 2nd in EPA per pass, 8th in EPA per rush. They allow a third down conversion 40% of the time. That's 20th. They allow a touchdown 60% of the time in the red zone. That is 19th. So like I said, 27% blitz rate. That's 20th in frequency. Over the last 8 games, they're 20th in pressure rate, 18th in sack rate. And so, this is a team that hasn't been super effective with their pass rush, but they're still very good with their pass defense. And they play a ton of zone, 83% zone coverage. That's number 2 in the NFL in terms of zone frequency. The Bills are going to get cover 3. They're going to get cover 4. They're going to get cover 6. Over the last 8 games, the Jaguars have allowed 4 passing touchdowns. They've intercepted 10 passes and have a passer rating against their coverage of 66.1, and they're allowing 5.37 yards per attempt. As you can imagine, those are all towards the top of the league. In fact, the Bills and the Jaguars over the last 8 games are number 1 and number 2 in yards per attempt against their defense. So 2 really good passing defenses in this game. Run defense for Jacksonville's been terrific. They've over the last 8 games, they've allowed 79 rushing yards per game. That's the lowest in the NFL. And I think they became the 3rd team since 2000 to not allow a 75-yard rusher. So we'll see if James Cook can get that done on Sunday. Personnel-wise, we'll talk about their defensive tackles. Devon Hamilton is their big-bodied nose tackle. He's not going to help them much on passing downs, but he's a very good run stuffer. They have Eric Armstead. You probably remember him from his time with the 49ers. He gives them some pass rush on the interior, long arms, heavy hands, good veteran player. They also have Matt Dickerson and Austin Johnson. Austin Johnson. He was on the Bills last year. He's a depth player for them. Matt Dickerson, another, I think he's on the wrong side of 30, kind of bounced around a little bit, but he helps take some snaps there at defensive tackle. On the edge, Joshua Hines-Allen, obviously one of the best edge rushers in the entire NFL. A lot of speed with him. And then Trayvon Walker, former number 1 overall pick. He's the running mate on the other side. A-plus run defender. Not quite the sack artist, right, as you might get with a Hines-Allen, but, certainly a very good, athletic, powerful, long-armed pass rusher. And so it'll be a big, big job here for Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown against this talented group of, a number 1 pick, and Josh Hines-Allen was a top 10 pick. So some really dynamic edge rushers here. They got some good depth there. Dennis Gardeck, he's a player that I really like. You maybe remember him from the Arizona Cardinals. He plays like his hair is on fire. He's like discount Andrew Van Ginkel. They also have DeJuan Smoot. Remember that guy? So some of their depth here is former Bills. Of course, DeJuan Smoot, really, his career was Jacksonville, came to Buffalo for 1 year, but you knew he was an important player for this Bills team last year. And he has a depth role for Jacksonville. He will reduce inside and rush interior gaps as well. So he'll get a little bit more run because of that versatility. At linebacker, this might be the best pair of linebackers in the league. It's certainly a top 3 tandem. Foyesade, Oluokun, super athletic, smart, can play sideline to sideline, can play downhill, good in coverage. And then Devin Lloyd, who is really just emerged this year, first-round pick a few years back. And he's another one of those do-everything linebackers, can play in coverage as well. And I think he has 5 interceptions this year. He's been unbelievable. So really outstanding pair of athletic linebackers. Then at corner, they have Greg Newsome, who they traded for this year. They had Tyson Campbell, who they a few years ago signed to a big contract extension. They traded Tyson Campbell for Greg Newsome. And Greg Newsome's come in and been really solid, getting a chance to play on the outside, which is a little bit different than in Cleveland, where he was playing a little bit more in the slot. Their other corner is Monteric Brown, who's been around for a few years. Not a super dynamic athlete, but a good zone corner, right? He kind of fits this type of defense. So, he's got some limitations, but think about kind of throughout the years the Bills have had this type of player, whether it's been like a Dane Jackson, a Levi Wallace type guy where, no one's going to really be too excited about him, but they're really smart zone players and have some ball skills. And Monteric Brown gives them that. And they have a good young slot player in Jerrion Jones, draft pick last year that looks like he's, becoming one of the best slot corners in the league. Then at safety, Antonio Johnson has just emerged in a big way. He was a good player at Texas A&M, and he provides a lot of versatility. He can play really all over the back seven, as kind of a stack backer in the slot from depth. Good physical player that's picking off the ball like crazy this year. And then they'll play 2 other safeties. Andrew Wingard, who I've kind of throughout his career I've thought of more as a special teams guy, more of a box safety, but they're getting a lot out of him in addition to Eric Murray, who's a veteran who I think has started games at corner, slot, deep safety, versatility. So they're going to play all 3 of those guys at safety, Johnson, Wingard, and Murray. But Antonio Johnson's a guy that's like the emerging star player. So a lot of talent, right? A lot of good players. And that's really been the thing with Jacksonville. You looked at the last few years, and it wasn't because they didn't have any good players. It obviously was a very poorly coached team, and that's changed. And they're getting a lot out of these players, and some of these guys that kind of were knocking on the door have really taken a big step, like a Devin Lloyd, like an Antonio Johnson. For them, I'm sure it's been really cool to see. So what are my keys for the Bills' offense against this defense? Well, I think when it comes to running the football, of course, James Cook's an identity piece for the Bills. The Jaguars have a great run defense, but the Bills have a great rushing offense, and that'll be a fun matchup, right? Good on good there. And so in studying the Jaguars' run defense, it is very good, but it's not as good defending zone runs. So they allow 2.8 yards per carry on gap runs. They allow 4.5 yards per carry on zone runs. And so I think this needs to be a very zone-heavy rushing game for the Bills. And the Bills are very multifaceted with their rushing offense. They'll run gap, they'll run zone. I think this is the type of game where you want to get them running laterally and trust James Cook to kind of sort it out, find those creases, put his foot in the dirt, and get downhill, see what type of success you can have. Because obviously it's going to have to be a big part of what the Bills do. And you don't want to run against a brick wall. And so if it's not there, it's not there. But if the Bills are going to test this really good run defense, I think it's got to be zone heavy. Number 2 is this is a huge game to involve your tight ends. Jacksonville's given up production this year to tight ends. So far this year, they've allowed 104 catches for 1,004 yards and 8 touchdowns to opposing tight ends. Top 10 in terms of the most allowed in all of those categories, including the 6th most amount of catches. Dawson Knox is having a great season. Dalton Kincaid, when he's been available, is having a great season. Well, the whole point of what the Bills have done with Dalton Kincaid over the last several weeks is making sure that he's optimized for this moment. We know that this Bills offense is different with him on the field. I think I saw the splits. Like, the Bills are averaging 32 points per game with Dalton Kincaid and 21 without him. It's pretty telling. And you watch the Bills, you know that Dalton Kincaid's the best pass catcher they have. Well, this is what you've been doing. You've been posturing for this moment. You've had him on a snap count here late in the season. He's rested. You gotta unleash him. There's no tomorrow, right? This is a big Dalton Kincaid game, and Dawson Knox should get his opportunities as well. So featuring these tight ends in the passing game, huge part of what the Bills need to do. And then number 3, I think this is an important game for the Bills to work the intermediate passing game. It's a modest pass rush, right? They're not getting a ton of pressure. They're not getting a ton of sacks. The Bills are a pretty good pass pro team. And I think this safety group is just okay. I really like Antonio Johnson, but I think the other guys are, more fringe starter type players in Murray and Wingard. I think you got to challenge that a little bit. Trust your protection to hold up and work the ball in that middle of the field and see what type of opportunities you can get with your tight ends. And, you've seen Brandon Cooks emerge a little bit. And, Josh Palmer hasn't had a super consistent season, but that's kind of where he's optimized to win. And I think that's where the Bills have to attack, is that intermediate area. Throws 10 to 20 yards down the field, I think, is going to be the sweet spot to give yourself a chance and obviously trust that protection to hold up and for Josh Allen to make those types of throws. Because unfortunately, I just don't know how much of a factor Josh Allen's mobility is going to be. I think that would be huge if it was, but obviously he's playing through this foot deal, which I think is limiting him. And so you got to have to work around that. And I think, using that arm talent and your weaponry in that intermediate range has got to be a big part of this passing game. All right, let's talk special teams real quick. Their kicker is unbelievable. Cam Little, second year out of Arkansas, 30 of 34 on field goals this year, 50 of 51 on extra points. He made from 70 in the preseason. He made from 68 earlier this year in Vegas, and then from 67 last week. So I think he's got the NFL record for the longest made field goal in the preseason, indoors and outdoors. So, with these new rules, this guy, what do they need? Like 1 first down and he's in range. So they got a heck of a kicker. Their punter is really good as well. Logan Cook, he's been their punter since 2018, one of the best punters in the league. They've got a very potent return situation, especially at punt returner. Parker Washington handles their punt returns. He's got 2 return touchdowns this year, had 1 last year. And so in 43 career returns, he's averaging over 14 yards and has 3 touchdowns. And then their kick returners are LaQuint Allen and Bashal Tutin. I'm sure there's some Syracuse fans listening to this. You know about LaQuint Allen and then Bashal Tutin, a couple of rookies. And while neither has a huge role offensively, they are the kick returners. They're both running backs that run in the 4-3. So explosive guys at the kick return spot. So the Bills need to be on their P's and Q's when it comes to covering kicks and punts in this game, because they got a lot of speed at kick returner and they got one heck of a punt returner. So a big challenge for the Bills on the road in Jacksonville. Certainly the Bills show up with Josh Allen and a ton of experience. I don't know how much that matters, right? What are you right now? And ultimately, what are you going to be on Sunday? I can sit here and tell you all about the Jaguars and, what's working for them and where maybe there's some chinks in the armor. The challenging part is, what are the Bills? What are the Bills? I think they're capable of showing up and being the best team in the NFL. I think they're capable of showing up and being very shaky. And so we'll see what shows up on Sunday. It's a good test. I like that Josh Allen's on our side. But obviously this is a team that should have a lot of confidence, and they do. Listen to their fans. Listen to Locked On Jaguars. Go back and hear Tony Wiggins and what he said on Monday about his expectations for Jacksonville in this game. So it's going to be a real battle. But ultimately, the only thing that's going to matter is what shows up on Sunday, who executes, and ultimately who has more points at the end. So that's my primer on Bills Jaguars. We got a whole lot more to do to cover this game. We'll talk to Tony Wiggins for Crossover Thursday is our next conversation. We'll get my final thoughts. We'll see where these injuries go and make sure that we're ready for Sunday afternoon. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.